What's your side hustle going to be in the metaverse? You're just going to be the spin instructor?
I mean,
you're going to be the tour guide.
I'm probably going to make like a booze line. Realistically.
Okay. I'm going to be
What are you going to do?
I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. You didn't believe me. Welcome to PowrUp, a podcast full of insights for women that lead. Hosted by Nat and Kristen from Powrsuit, we're on a mission to amplify your impact as a leader. Join us each week and we'll share with you what's shaping our future from AI to Gen Z. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Welcome to the metaverse. Nat and I are going to tackle the metaverse today because we genuinely believe women leaders need to be across this thing. Whatever this thing is, that's what we're going to talk about today. Full disclosure, I have, I'm not going to speak for you, Nat, but I have yet to experience it. Have you experienced the metaverse?
No. Okay. No, I mean, I've seen some pictures that look wildly unappealing.
So, well, we're going to chat about that today. I think Nat knows you've got a great definition and give us some bit of history, but, well, let's just jump in there. Go for it. What the heck is the metaverse?
Yeah, I actually think it's one of those things, as with most new tech, no one actually knows yet, really. So it turns out, as I learnt the other day, the term was invented by this guy called Neil Stephenson, who's actually a sci-fi writer. And it was used to describe a dystopian world. And when I hear dystopian world, I immediately think Handmaid's Tale. So I'm like, I don't want part of that.
No, thank you.
But which is also quite funny as well, because what happened, and I think he did that in like the 1960s or something. And then suddenly, when was it? When did Zuck change Facebook to become Meta? Was that
2021?
Like 2021.
Yeah.
So suddenly all these tech companies started talking about the metaverse as this like hugely positive place where we all should want to hang out, which is somewhat ironic given its origins. But my understanding is it's basically an umbrella term for all sorts of new tech, and also existing tech like augmented reality, virtual reality, and the goal of the metaverse, like it got hard launched. You know how people hard launch their relationships and their babies? It got hard launched. But maybe
what is hard launching a relationship? Is that when you go, I'm in a relationship on Facebook?
So like Rihanna hard launched her pregnancy by you just turn up and you're like, I'm pregnant. Or I turn up and I'd be like, this is my
as
new
opposed
partner.
to
when
letting
you like
it
suddenly have them in the backgrounds of some photos. That's a soft launch.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Okay, so
I
agree with you. There all of a sudden was a hard launch of the metaverse.
Yes.
Okay.
And maybe if you put it in the hard launch, soft launch terminology, it's in the very early stages of the relationship. Yep. So people like Zuck were really excited about it. And maybe...
And then everyone started throwing billions of dollars at this thing.
Yes. So that seems like really the thing. It's these incredible virtual worlds. My understanding is that tech, as it always does, evolves very quickly. And people like good old Neil have had these ideas for decades, but haven't been able to execute on them because technology hasn't been there.
Yeah.
But we live in this incredible time, and everyone we've been speaking to recently is so excited about this time we live in where tech is kind of catching up. And so what used to be impossible is becoming more possible. So the metaverse, where they think it's going to end up, who knows how long from now, maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, is going to be this seamless transition from real life into virtual world. So the example I have in my head that no one's given me, but how I'd like to think of it, is we're sitting here now in this beautiful bed recording this podcast, and people who are listening could actually just come virtually and sit with us in real time and then go back to their lounges. And so you're just like interacting with people. If I want to go see my best friend, I don't have to get on a plane. Just go hang out in their lounge with her and her babies for a bit. Yeah,
and what's so interesting is to chat to women experts, because we're really intrigued as to, why are you involved in this? Thank goodness there's women involved in this. And what does it mean to you? And it's so interesting. I don't know if you've noticed, but every call we're on, community comes out. Like, people talk a lot about this global community. And so, we are confined physically here. And if we can start to create these global communities, their feeling is it's world changing. And it is why women are engaging in these things. In my opinion, they're not there to get rich quick. They're not there to, I don't know, whatever all the reasons that people do, but they chat about community and changing the world.
I agree. I don't know if it's just your opinion, because I share your opinion. But I think that's something that's come out really strongly to me. And what I found really fascinating, I spoke to an expert, a New Zealand-based expert, Jessica Mannins, who's been in this area for, about a decade, I'd say, at least.
Adopter.
She's doing some incredible stuff. And her company started, I remember talking to her years ago, and they'd leased this building, office, something. And we're trying to create this idea of this virtual, almost like a MVP metaverse, where you could go into the space, and almost in my head it was like playing Laser Strike but with virtual reality. So you've got physical objects, but you've got this layer of the cool stuff digital technology can bring over the top and interact with each other. And so she's been in the space for ages, and I think what is fascinating about it is when she talks about it, she says it has been heavily dominated by women, at least in New Zealand, until quite recently, when the Zuckerbergs of the world and stuff started to join in big ways. So up until recently, it has had a lot of women, and proportionately.
And desktop research, but it appears as though women are really prolific users of the metaverse as it stands today, which is not one connected digital world, but it's all sorts of different digital worlds depending on who's building it. So I think anyone who's got teens, you will have seen them in Minecraft, you will have seen them in Fortnite. Those are ones that you don't need VR goggles for. You don't have to, it's not an immersive experience, but they're building digital worlds. So that could almost be like, I don't know, is that 1.0 of this thing? Actually, there's probably 1.0s, but it's a very early, digital world. You're just not immersively experiencing it. But what's interesting is the VR headset, which I'm like, I have yet to put one on. So embarrassed about that to admit that. But women are, and they're going to exercise classes and they're going to concerts and they're doing stuff. But I think the big risk is that men seem to be, to your point, they've rushed in. They seem to be building these worlds.
Yes. And I have tried on a virtual reality headset a couple of times, and it's so fun.
Did you get vertigo?
So once I put one on and I went on a roller coaster, and I actually, I think they ended up having to pull me down into a chair because I almost fell over backwards, because you're so in it that you're like, you move your body to avoid things, and like it's such an immersive experience. So, but I think it is also quite a barrier to using it, because I don't know how anyone would do an exercise class with that clunky thing on their head. Like, I don't know if it's easy enough to jump, but maybe they've come a long way since I used them. But definitely it's not the same thing. I mean, it's almost like
they're probably in spin, and they're probably just out biking through France.
I think you're right. I actually think I've seen it on ads. You're right. I'm like, I've got like, I mean,
Peloton's probably invested in some VR.
Think they have.
Of course they have.
Of course they have.
And then you get to go
doing like,
you're biking through France.
In my metaverse is that.
Well, and talking about not building things for women, I don't even think half the VR sets that are being built by men are even made for women.
Oh, they're probably not. And
huge opportunities.
This was a fun fact I found out the other day, which you probably already knew, but 50% of gamers are actually women.
Yeah.
Like and that's not the case with game developers, and it's sort of starting to feel like it's the same with virtual reality.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has come across in a lot of the conversations we've been having, and we've been having so many conversations about stuff that we find quite scary, because we are absolute bunnies in this area and a lot of this stuff, is that the faster the tech moves, it feels like the faster the potential for people to miss out, for one group to become really dominant and to sort of at scale replicate the same problems we're already dealing with in the world.
In the real world. And that's why Powrsuit wanted to tackle this, not because we are experts, but because if this is a thing, and I don't know if it's like hands down a thing, or is this just going to be a value add in our lives and a cool experience? I don't know. There sounds like there's some really interesting early stuff happening in healthcare and surgeries in the metaverse, and all sorts of great experiential stuff. Fantastic for people who are disabled. Obviously, can't go anywhere. What an incredible way to experience life and the world, or these incredible worlds. But I think the reason we wanted to tackle it is because women should be across it. as leaders, we should recognize that this stuff is happening. And, we get this classic, if we don't know about it, it's not for us. Or you get these subcultures that share the same language and they're using all this jargon. And then all of a sudden it becomes its own subculture and it's not for us. And we risk being locked out of that conversation. So we are, we strong believers in Powrsuit. We have to talk about this stuff. So we are going to give our 101 here. We've talked to some experts. We've already talked about Jess from Beyond, and really kind of maybe convince people at least to be open-minded, and let's keep an eye on this thing.
Yeah, I agree because I wouldn't even say either of us is particularly sold on it as yet, but I think to your point, so many great use cases now with different groups. And interesting to point out that the reason Jess at least believes, which I'm not sure if has been backed up by what you've read as well, that it's taken off so quickly was lockdown. Virtual world solved a real problem for a planet that suddenly became extremely isolated. So when you talk about some groups of people who can't travel as easily, can't leave their homes as easily, this is a real way to connect people, which is why I love the idea of women who care about community and are coming at it from a community point of view, being the brains behind these worlds. Because those are the worlds we want to create, right? Not these sort of mirrors of some of the worst things that are happening in society now.
And I also know, Nat, that you are concerned about the climate and your plane mileage. So, should you be getting on a plane and going on your cruises? I don't know. I mean, you put with your parents, put a VR headset on and off you go.
I'm not giving up gold. I will be pried out of this dead earth.
To be fair, I can't let you give it up because you do get me into the lounges. So.
Although I have actually noticed on that front, it is watching breakfast this morning. I've taken up watching breakfast again.
Is this TV? This is breakfast TV.
Yeah, breakfast TV. Is that the conversation on the news these days has really switched. Like they were talking about the Football World Cups and how we shouldn't be traveling. Like if FIFA has made a commitment to removing climate or reducing their climate impact, they really shouldn't be having all these tournaments all around the world. And one of the things that made me think, because I've got the metaverse in my head, is that these are prime opportunities to go. At the moment, our viewing experience of a cup game is pretty cool. You go to a pub or something, you watch it on TV. Imagine if everyone could just be at the stadium and we don't need to fly. Like I find that fascinating.
Brings up so many things. Number one, I think democratized because everyone can see it. But then number two, I go, advertising revenues, how are they going to do that? Well, I mean, I think there's probably I actually imagine there's a whole bunch more opportunity for that. And I think I was such a noob, I hadn't got my head around, like, because the example I was giving was a Beyonce concert, because there's a Beyonce concert, well, she's launching whatever her next round of concerts, and obviously dying to get on one of those climate crime planes and get to a stadium. And so I was like, what happens if I can't? Because that's a real risk these days, right? Like ticket prices are so expensive. Imagine if that just becomes part of how we price things, that a physical plane ticket, very expensive, true. It's a gateway.
But but I can go for
and
a tenth of the price.
Limitless.
And get maybe 50% of the experience. Like, I don't know. I'm a skeptic. I don't know how they're going to recreate real world experiences that are as good as the real world. But I also have been proven wrong a lot of times.
Yeah, and it might just be that it's 25 years away. This is very early days. We're going to look back when we're in our rocking chairs. And, well, actually, we'll be in VR on the beach. So,
well, and we all know technology changes slow and changes fast. And we were talking earlier about phone calls that we went from letters to phone calls to email to video calls. And this might be the next step. So it may not be that we live in a virtual world. We're not at the Matrix point. But it may be that the experience evolves and suddenly instead of a video call, I have a 3D call where I can sit with my friend. And so it's not like I'm in it all the time. It's that I'm starting to use part of it, and it'll become this really seamless transition.
Great segue, because I spoke with Candice Costa, who is this influencer in this space. She's amazing. She must be Brazilian because she speaks Portuguese. So she's Brazilian, but she's living in Sweden, as you do, traveling back and forth between London, going to all these different places. And her genuine belief is it's going to be hybrid and we have to have in real life experiences. But there are going to be a number of compelling reasons why to go into these digital worlds. So she has helped structure today's chat in, because I just said, why should women care? And she gave me 3 reasons why, and we're going to chat about each of them. The first is that women should care because we can make money there. So that's the first statement. We're going to chat about that. The second is because we build things with care and with empathy. So we need to be there and building this thing. And the final one is that because it's fun. So I think we can dissect each of those. But should we start with the money piece? What's your thoughts on that? Because she had some strong ones and I thought, whoa, that feels 25 years in the future. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this probably showcases my lack of understanding that the way Jess put it to me, because like I say, I'm pretty skeptical, is everything that's now in the real world will be available in the metaverse. She said the same. And I'm like, okay, how? And why would I want to buy a necklace in the virtual world? And that's where she pointed me to the newsletter we just wrote saying, well, women control 85% of household spending and they're currently paying a lot for things in the metaverse for their children.
True.
On these Roblox games and Fortnite games. So there is already a massive group of people who were brought up online who immediately have seen the value in buying virtual replicas of all the stuff we have
so true.
In real life.
I'm watching my son do that. He will spend his money from a summer job on weird tokens.
Yeah.
You're right. It's
so
a thing.
I think that is a thing.
So there's an exchange of value that's currently happening in the metaverse, and it actually is happening via kind of, well, digital tokens and most cryptocurrency, and that is going to be another episode coming up. But yeah, so it feels like there already is kind of an exchange of happening in order to unlock new levels of experiences or in order to equip yourself with things. So
to not be a default.
Yeah.
Which is actually
basic.
Yeah, oh, basic. Isn't it basic?
But default was that felt very techie.
Well, I've just been around a bunch of 10-year-olds who are like, don't be a default. We bully defaults. And I was like, I don't know if online bullying is a good idea. And I was like, this is also a fascinating, well, I mean, so I know we're talking about money. But I find that part really fascinating because it could be a great democratizer if at the moment real world stuff is expensive, right? Having what is it, Gucci handbag, having the right shoes at school, all of these things cost, and something about the virtual world is a great leveler. I imagine if I was a designer brand, I could charge a lot more for my necklaces. But it just sort of feels like it's an opportunity for people to have access to the same stuff. It's just that I can't quite grapple with, but it's not real.
Yeah. No, I hear you. In a different like, let's take a fashion designer right now, for example, and they are designing in real life costumes that are being shown off. And I know that the Metaverse Fashion Week, like the global Metaverse Fashion Week, is coming up. So what we're seeing are fashion designers that are designing for in real life people, and there's going to be catwalks. But they also have a huge amount of influence over digital designers and coders and their departments now. So all of these major houses now actually have, entire digital companies that people are working for, and they're developing the clothing that will be shown in the metaverse. And so they're making money doing that. They're probably making money showing and selling their clothing, and there are brands living in this space. And so I guess my point was this is a really great example of a job that is around today, and people are making money in both worlds.
Fascinating. And it's sort of, you saying that just reminded me of Kim Kardashian and her game. Remember, I don't know if you follow her.
No, I don't.
The Kardashians.
Do tell.
But she launched a game ages ago, I think. That was, and it was probably very rudimentary, but it was people outfitting Kim Kardashians, I think, and playing around in this world.
So there is a sense that you can do your work in both worlds and as a result make money. And we know what money is empowering for women. That is the number one reason that gives women freedom to walk away from bad relationships, bad jobs. There's a retirement gap. We end up at the end of our lives with less money. And so in order for women to be fully empowered and live their best lives, they do need to be financially independent. And so her feeling was, look, if you are a teacher today, you can not only teach in the real world, but you can be a community moderator in the metaverse, because we've talked about community. You're going to need people running them. You're going to need people engaging with them, making sure they're safe. If you are, and she was a huge proponent of, if you're looking for a career change, become a coder. There are so many programs out there nowadays. If you're looking for a mid-career career change, become a coder. And we need women coders. We need actually women building these worlds. And she was like, it is not as hard as you think. You know, anyone can go get retrained to do this. And then you will therefore probably be building and making money by building these worlds.
Amazing. And I think also just another push for becoming an engineer. I think some of the courses are about 16 weeks, and I think people have a vision of what engineering looks like that's completely inaccurate. It's very creative. It's very interesting. It's very much about problem solving. But if you don't want to become a developer, which I imagine a few of the people listening don't, the challenge Jess said to me about making money through the metaverse, and I think it's always the case with new technologies, early adopters have quite an opportunity to make some money. I remember when Airbnb first came out in Wellington, I was probably one of the few places that listed my spare room on Airbnb. I just bought this house and I was like, I don't want a flatmate, and oh my goodness, I was rented it out every night. I made a lot of money in the first year, then got overwhelmed. I feel like the same with the metaverse, that if you are in jewelry, if you're in makeup, if you're in fashion, if you're selling anything, art, selling anything in the real world, it's worth looking into how you might be able to replicate that. And you don't actually necessarily, I'm speaking off the top of my head here now, I don't know if the tools are around yet, but it won't be long before, if they're not there already, before other people can make those virtual representations. Like Jess said, think about it. If you run a Shopify site now, like a website that sells
you'll
stuff,
run one there.
How can you do that? And so it's actually, I think that is a challenge for people who are in this area already, is there's nothing to lose by just giving it a whirl and having a look into it and going, I'm really proud of my stuff.
What's your side hustle going to be in the metaverse? You're just going to be the spin instructor?
I mean,
you're going to be the tour guide.
I'm probably going to make like a booze line. Realistically.
Okay. I'm going to be
what are you going to do?
I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. You didn't believe me. No, I'm not. But that is, I did as.
Can you do a joke?
No, I don't have a joke. I am no, but I
fly in the metaverse.
I am going to be an inspirational speaker. I'm going to be a life coach.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I probably need to upgrade my booze ambitions to something else.
Will you be? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to be a life coach in the metaverse.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Thanks. Let's look into that.
I could be your complimentary gin. Like, you could sit there with the gin
and
tonic.
You can. You'll be the life of the party, Nat. So the second, so look, we know money is important. We think we're doing is really challenging people. If you are creative and the metaverse is, going to become a thing, you should be there. If you are an entrepreneur, you should be there. If you have any transferable skills, Candace just went on about, they need writers, and the metaverse is going to need everything to create these incredible experiences, these inclusive experiences, be it exercise to,
I think that's one of the things, and we did talk about engineers a bit before, but I'm always having to remind myself is technology is, yes, engineers, but all the surrounding stuff, storytelling, graphic design, community management, all these skills that a lot of women already have.
Strategic decision making.
Absolutely. So you don't actually need to become an engineer to get involved. There's a lot of different ways. But I suppose on that front, why the second point that Candace gave you was the metaverse needs women leaders.
Yeah, needs women. And
why?
She used quite a ruthless example, and it was because we don't want it to be like Uber. And that's terrible because we do use Uber. But when Uber launched...
Oh, I don't anymore.
Oh, you don't use it anymore?
No, unless...
But that's because you're on a budget.
It started because I'd spent $5,000 a year on Uber, and now and because there was a lot of people not using Uber because of the ethical reasons.
Yeah, great.
And so I challenged myself
ditto.
not to.
I didn't like the culture
and
of it.
For climate change, Kristen, now I'm trying to support our public bus systems so that we invest in them.
Great. I love it. Good. Good for you. However, her example was when Uber, was built, there was the odd woman, if anyone's seen, I can't recall the show on HBO, it's fantastic, but there were obviously some women at Uber, but largely it was very bro culture. It was dominated by men, dominated by, bold risk taking, get this thing out to the market, but they built it for men. And what I mean by that is they had no consideration for what it would be. This was a world before that we did not get into strangers' cars, keep in mind. So now we are moving from a world where we didn't get into people's cars we didn't know to all of a sudden there's random people picking us up. And no one was like, how would a woman at 3 a.m. coming home from the bar feel like? What would that experience be like? How are we ensuring her safety? They didn't think about any of that. So what happened? Sexual assaults. Horrible, horrible, horrible stuff.
Did they happen in Uber?
Yeah. Just Google it. It's awful. In fact, it's still happening today. However, now if you go into Uber, it's happening today because people still break the law. And that is a risk, I suppose. But if you go into Uber now, you can actually, there's a safety button.
Yes, I've seen that.
Other people can track you.
Yes,
all that stuff. So, but had women been at the table, had women been there and gone, let's walk through a day in the life of a woman, you know, where we have to, in the middle of the night, walk down the middle of a well-lit street in order to be safe, that we have to worry about walking in the bush at night. So none of these...
And at day.
Yeah. Yeah, true. And so this is a world that has been designed for men in Silicon Valley, in that there are products that are not built for us. There's a great book by Caroline Paris called Invisible Woman, which is, you know, just shows that so many things are not built by us, therefore they're not built for us. And I think the metaverse, you talk about wanting to be safe in a virtual world. You want to talk about not being hypersexualized and it being an inclusive, safe place. We need women at the table making these decisions.
And I think your point about Uber makes a lot of sense. And I would challenge Airbnb in the same boat. You're going to stay in someone's house often, especially if you're in a shared house. And the example that I presume a lot of people know, but things aren't designed for women. Right down to crashing cars. They use male-sized models to test the safety of cars. Yeah. So women are more at risk in cars because they're not included in the test. I think they might be now, but they used to not be. So I so agree that safety function, I struggle to see how I would be unsafe in a virtual world. And then, I mean, it's such an odd concept because I still can't imagine it. But
well, there were I know that Meta, which is Facebook's one, there was a New York Times, it was a woman that wrote this article, and she lived for, what did she say? Something crazy, like 4 weeks. Every single night at a certain time, she put on her headset and she lived in metaverse, for all night, every night, and then wrote this fantastic New York Times column on it. She did like the stand-up comedian shows, which is why I was like, that's going to be me. But then you're like, you're not funny. And I'm like, oh yeah.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway. And
I was actually thinking you were going to say you're not funny, but you're like...
this is after, actually, people were complaining of being accosted and groped. And so she did have an experience. So what they then did was put safety barriers around, and you can tap people out. And there's now, like, again, when they launched the thing, there weren't things where you could get out of an unsafe position. And isn't that weird? You're not physically feeling it, but still you've got someone in your face and groping you.
And that's maybe, I was just thinking as you were saying that was such an oversight on my side, that I think when you were talking before about physical safety, I think I had that top of mind.
Yeah.
You're right that mental safety is actually, I mean, online bullying is already, I mean, I think anyone with teenagers is probably living in terror. I can't imagine. We all had what we had at school in real life. I don't even know what it looks like at scale in the metaverse. So you're absolutely right. Creating safe spaces is much more than physical safety. And the idea that you can be in a metaverse, and I was just thinking about sort of stalking and harassment, there's so many tactics that people use to intimidate each other, and those would be very easy to replicate online. Like, assuming you're in the metaverse with people you may know, that would be a very easy way. So I
and I was reading again, these are experiences I haven't seen firsthand, but there are teachers that are taking some of their students to virtual places instead of, we all did the baking soda volcano experiment. Now imagine putting on a VR headset. This is, of course, when they're accessible and they don't cost a gazillion dollars. This is classic.
Or we can scrap them because it's somehow
Or we can scrap them
eyeballs.
Because maybe there's something else. I don't know, a big piece of plastic on our faces. But they're taking them to Mount Vesuvius as an example. There are examples of people going to fashion shows and doctors that are using it for, assessments and surgery. In fact, John Hopkins had their first surgery using a digital virtual world. But I think...
Well, I was going to say, because it feels like there's a lot of negatives. If we talk about why the metaverse needs women leaders, it's almost to offset the negatives. I think there's a bunch of that stuff.
Yes.
Avoid the problems of the past, which we know as technology gets more at scale, become bigger. The second one is, though, how can we make the future brighter? And one of the things that I've been really pondering, just watching all these kids around me play in these virtual spaces. And by the way, we're using the term virtual spaces, digital worlds, metaverse somewhat interchangeably because I don't quite know. I think it is an umbrella term, but also I think because I still see the virtual worlds of now as they're just standalone worlds, whereas the way I see the metaverse of the future is it's all just one seamless thing. Who knows? Anyway, I digress. That there's these children who have such a different concept of self. Like, we had fashion, we had we got packed for lunch, we had our schoolwork as ways to identify ourselves, really. We didn't have a lot of tools, whereas kids these days now in these worlds can change who they are. They can experiment and try on new hats. And I feel like we're entering a world where labels are becoming less and less of a thing. And this new generation is growing up going, I don't want to identify as a boy, I don't want to identify as a girl, I want to identify as a cat today, whatever it is. That having that diverse leadership, recognizing the potential and starting to go, how do we build these worlds, talking about community again, to be extremely inclusive and to really think outside the world we live in today. And I think, to your point about some of the negatives we deal with, I think it perfectly positions women to imagine worlds that look very different and to be much more innovative about the spaces we create, because we see some of these problems that may be invisible to other groups.
Well, and I think that when we hit that point where it becomes a beautiful, a safe, an interesting place, I think you and I will be more compelled, not to say it's not safe, sorry, but it still feels fairly gamey. Like when you looked at, remember Mario Brothers? I don't know if you played that, but we did. But if we were to go into a world and put on a headset, and I've seen what Meta looks like. He did this whole virtual reality Horizon thing, he being Mark Zuckerberg, and it just looked terrible. Like, I was like cartoon characters, and even the metaverse, his Meta has people floating around without legs. And so, although I think he's recently added them, but I'm like, that is just not a world I need to be in right now. And the New York Times person was like, nah, jury's kind of out. Like, it was interesting. I can see where this thing's going. So to your point, we're not quite ready to jump in, but we have to stay across this.
And saying that, I feel like we are, for exactly that reason. And the reason we're talking to other people about is, for example, someone I know at the moment is looking for jobs and looking in this area. Did I talk about this the last? No. Okay. We've been talking a lot about a lot of different things recently, and there's a lot of tech companies cropping up talking about Web3, metaverse, AI.
Yes.
And in a lot of these job ads, they're asking for years of experience. Who has years of experience in the metaverse? Like, what? You've got a maximum of 1 year, unless you are a certain group of people who have nerded out on this for a while. And that group is predominantly white males, especially men who've come from a background where they have done really well in tech and are now setting up new companies. And so what the risk we run with this is, even just those job ads as they stand are creating by default a more and more exclusive world, because women and people who haven't been involved in the metaverse are looking at them going, I have no way in. So I think when we are talking now even about how do we make it more delightful and interesting to us, that's exactly the kind of leadership it needs, because the people going into it at the moment and the people heavily into it, there's a substantial group of them who are building it for their own reasons. And so they don't care so much about the aesthetics of it or the inclusiveness of it, because they can't see it. So even if you don't have the technical understanding of it, I think as leaders and as influencers, it's actually not our right, it's our obligation.
It is our obligation
to get involved.
Absolutely, for a few of these reasons. And while you were chatting, I was thinking about...
you were listening.
I was listening. I was listening. But I am I am multitasking, but I think I've also thought many of us are parents, and I know I've got a teenager, and what's kind of interesting is she is looking at design, and one of the things she was looking at was spatial design. So I automatically go to, oh, that sounds kind of interesting, and what does that look like nowadays? And I don't know if I found it. I was looking at showing her different places she could consider for uni or for training, and all of a sudden it was like, well, why wouldn't you go into designing spatial design for metaverse? Like, that's actually something she could go get a degree in right now, is starting to design these worlds and being really thoughtful about, you know,
the kind of world she'd want to create.
Yeah,
what would a world for her look like?
Yeah.
That
So
would
I think,
be exciting.
To your point, it's our obligation, not only because we are leaders, but it is, we just don't want to be left behind. We just can't be left behind. We can't be left behind.
And there are some worrying signs already, like the job ads, like the fact that 50% of gamers are women, but they're not represented in the industry, the fact that tech moves so quickly and it's very easy to get left behind. But I think it is very important to scrap that idea of you need to have technical know-how to get involved, because we still need business, and I think Jessica made this point beautifully. All the skills you need in the real world, you need in the metaverse.
Yes.
So get stuck in. If it's interesting at all to you, go have a look.
Yeah, no, I love it. And we'll get to action in a minute. Let's talk about the last point, and from Candace, which was because it's fun. And we like to have fun. Now, you, more than most people that I know, go to concerts. You go to so many concerts.
Do you know why? I don't feel like I'm a big concert goer, but I bought a bunch of concert tickets over the last couple of years that all got delayed, and suddenly they're all now.
Well, you're at a concert every weekend.
Oh, it's been great.
But again, I haven't experienced this, but if you can go to a concert without parking your car and in your lineups, and it is this immersive experience, that would be it would be fun. Busing without riding on the bus to your concert, that would be fun. Candace talked a little bit about, like, in the metaverse, you can read Vogue. You don't have to go buy it. You can borrow a Gucci bag. You can dress in Prada. You can do all of these things without having to do it in the real world. And she found that fun. She's actually quite involved in this fashion space. But she says, I go sit front row, and I've purchased a pair of sparkly wings. And she's like, where in the world can you wear wings? And she's got these 10-foot high wings that she puts on. I mean, I can't even envision it. She said she was going to send me a photo. But she was like, because I've got crystal wings and it's fun, and I get to go see fashion shows, and I get to go experience things and connect and have a great time. She talked about also an African safari. She said she sat in this thing and it was so real. She could hear, she could smell, she could see it. It was like she was there. She got goosebumps. So, because it's fun.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think,
or it will be.
Well, I think what the way I see it at the moment is, because I still am challenged by the idea of how it's different from virtual reality, the goggles. I think it's probably quite similar, maybe just better graphics, etc., etc. Fine. I think the thing that Jess said that spoke to me the most is the leaders behind the metaverse and people like us need to really challenge ourselves with this. How will we design these spaces to be better than the experience we have in the real world? So we talked a bit about safety, and that's cool. Safety alone, it is a table stake to me. Like, I don't want to go. That's why I don't walk in the bush at night. Like, I just won't go anywhere that's not safe.
Standing in queues
next
to sweaty people.
I think there's some benefits there. I would say that there is an opportunity to, again, just really reinvent how we think about what a concert experience could look like. So Beyonce, could I? Yes, I can get out of the queue. Great. I don't need to line up for drinks. Greater. But can I meet Beyonce?
Yeah.
Like, what stops me being on the stage as her backup dancer? Like, but actually, realistically, right? Like, no one else has to see my metaverse, or like me and that's like. How can these experiences...
your avatar will be amazing.
Kristen's on the side doing her stand-up comedy as a starter,
coaching, inspiring people.
But I think that when I think of it like that and go, okay, so what would make a concert experience better? It's not necessarily the same stuff that I do in a current concert. It's like, there's no limits anymore. Like, why am I not in Beyonce's car sitting next to her on the way there?
Yeah.
Why am I not being her backup dancer or singer if what I will be able to sing in the metaverse, I presume.
And I don't want to be labeled. I don't want to look a certain way. I'm happy to be, I'm a digital nomad.
I would like to look like Beyonce.
Okay, great. I mean, who doesn't? Digital nomad is really what we can be. And the interesting thing when you think about that is everything goes away. Like these constraints of gender, constraints of your age, there will be no ageism. These constraints that limit us as humans engaging with one another, those disappear because you can be whatever you want to be.
I love that. And I think when you say that, it makes me think these technologies make us more human. And that's the phrase I've heard a lot when we've been talking to these experts recently. If I can go into a Beyonce concert and my virtual self is presenting as a man, I will understand more the experience of a man in a way that I could never in the real world.
Yeah.
So the more we can experience life from the perspective of others and the less barriers there are to travel, to go. I mean, I feel like a lot of New Zealanders, and I know not all our listeners are from New Zealand, but New Zealand is so geographically isolated. And we often hear talk about people who've left and people who've never left, and how people who don't leave New Zealand often take a lot of what we have here for granted. You leave, you come back, and you're like, oh my goodness, we live in a dreamscape, and we have incredible social safety nets, and we have incredible nature. What if this gave us all the ability not just to leave and to come back, not just to go to Hawaii and come back, but to go to actual Hawaii, go and live a Hawaiian lifestyle with actual Hawaiians, not the massive 5-star resort owners who came in. Can we experience and see what other people live like?
Yeah, genuine.
Yes,
genuine.
And connect with other humans and understand each other more. Like that to me is where we go, the metaverse adds something.
Yeah, there's
like,
the open,
and the Beyonce concert, obviously.
That's
and Kristen doing stand-up.
No.
I'm at every gig.
I'm going to be practicing for next time. I love it. Right. Well, I think we are at action time. And because we do like to give little actions, or we're just talk. So if we can all take an action to take a step towards empowering ourselves with this information so we feel better equipped the next time we're in a conversation, the next time we see a headline, we might click on it and read. What's the thing we should do?
I'm going to say 2. I'm going to throw a surprise one
You
at you.
always do 2.
I know, but the second one is something that I talked quickly to Jess about. First one is an action that everyone should do.
Okay.
Everyone should do it this weekend, especially if you have children. They will love you. Go to an arcade, put on a VR headset, and give it a whirl.
Great.
Just because I think when we're talking about this, Kristen will do it this weekend.
We will.
Oh no, I'm going to Auckland. Sorry. I'm bussing to Auckland. But if you try on the headset, you have this now a picture of what this might look like. Yes. And I think that could be the most inspirational way to go, and then you start kicking off the excitement.
But we should warn everyone, it might not be the most. We have sold the metaverse basically.
We've done them with Zuckerberg.
We have sold this thing. It's probably not there today.
I think some of the places at arcades are pretty good.
Great.
Do a Google,
find
the best place, ask a kid near you, they'll know.
Great.
And just go try it.
Or a Bing.
Or Bing. What's his name?
Do a Google or a Bing, Sydney. Anyway.
Ask ChatGPT.
Yeah.
The second action is for people who might be at all interested. One of the things we talk about at Powrsuit a lot is building your community networking, finding people who can help you. And we've been doing that a lot for this podcast, to shoulder tap people, to go onto LinkedIn.
They're so open to chat.
And Jessica Mannins from Beyond I said Jess because I was like, is she Jess or Jessica? Jessica.
Pass.
I call her Jessica.
Great.
I think you've called her Jess.
Great.
So Jessica said, contact her at Beyond if you're interested in looking at the area.
Nice.
I think she's an incredibly busy lady, so I would challenge you instead to do the homework yourself. Look up on LinkedIn people who are involved in...
Candace Costa, you can follow her on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And she posts every week. I'm talking here, I'm talking about this, all over the world.
Absolutely. And ask someone out for a wine or a coffee or a 15-minute or 30-minute call, and talk to someone and make connections with other women, other men, other people who are already in this world, because if we probably can attest to it. It's really fun learning about it.
Yeah, it
and
is.
the more we talk about it, I think even in the last week.
It's so fun chatting to people about passionate about different things.
Oh, it's so great.
I
So
know.
do
And
that.
it does paint a hopeful future.
And then you can go and apply for these jobs saying, yeah, I've totally got metaverse experience.
Loads of it. I love it. That was fun. Thanks everyone for listening. Please check us out at powrsuit.com. Sign up to our great newsletters. Subscribe to the podcast so you can hear lots of great episodes. And we'll chat soon.